All right, there's quite a bit going on around the NFL today, just a few days ahead of the start of the 2024 league year. And none of it specifically pertains to the 49ers as far as the direct news today, but a lot of it ties into what the 49ers are doing, and it opens up a lot of good discussions. And we can start with this. The Buffalo Bills are making some major cuts today, several of them today. Why? Because the Buffalo Bills began the day way over the cap. They're about $40 million over the salary cap. And with the new league year starting a week from now on Wednesday, March 13th, that's the deadline to be cap compliant. So the Bills have let go Tre'Davious White. I'd call him a star cornerback. He's just been hurt a lot over the past couple of years, but this is a guy that was an all-pro back in 2020. Jordan Poyer, another star player. Mitch Morse, their starting center. Deontay Hardy, who I think is immediately on the 49ers list of potential free agent to sign. That's the return specialist, a really twitchy 5'6" player for the Bills, and another cornerback, Siran Neal. But Buffalo has had to release a bunch of players to fit under the salary cap, and it immediately provides us with a case study because Buffalo had to make these cuts. The 49ers, meanwhile, are in cap compliance right now. They're right near that top 51 rule, maybe a couple 100,000 under or over, but essentially in cap compliance. They might rearrange a deck chair to get things ready for Wednesday, but they don't have to make a major move to be in cap compliance, unlike a lot of these teams. And one of the main reasons why that's the case is the 49ers actually have the largest salary cap in the NFL this season, adjusted $296.6 million. They've managed to carry over $36 million from last year. And they also got some adjustments due to the fact that some incentives weren't earned. So they've done a really good job managing their money. And, since it is salary cap compliance time, since it is time to discuss how teams could fit under the financial limit, I thought that we'd run an explainer for the NFL salary cap. I thought, I'm going to have it here with liabilities, carryover, restructures. And I thought that we would really get into the classroom and we'd really discuss how the San Francisco 49ers have found themselves in cap compliance, which players they might be able to sign using the Build Your Roster tool, which players might be out of their reach, and, just in general, how they differ from Buffalo. Because somebody tweeted me saying, oh, Buffalo's doing it the right way. Unlike the 49ers, Buffalo is cutting players, getting younger, and the 49ers are just doubling down on aging players. And it's like, wait, what the hell are you talking about, man? First off, based on the tweet that I got, this one that I'm talking about, based off that person's advocating for the 49ers to cut players in their primes. Here's one thing about what Buffalo did today. When you look at the players they cut, none of these guys are in their primes, especially the biggest names on here, Tre'Davious White and Jordan Poyer. These guys were in their primes about 3 or 4 years ago. These guys are not in their primes. If you want the 49ers to do the same thing and just go cut some of their higher priced players, they'd be cutting guys like Christian McCaffrey. They'd be cutting guys who are playing the best football of their careers right now. On top of that, it's not good business to cut players in their primes. You want to double down on good players in their primes. And we can go to the salary cap sheet here to start talking about that, to start discussing how that would work under the structure of a team that fits under the cap. But you want to find a way to keep star players in the NFL while filling out a robust back half of the roster. And the way to do that is to fill out the back half and to fill out the margins of the roster with cheaper, younger, cost-controlled talent. So the draft is so important because with the draft, it's on a rookie wage scale. So the players are slotted for certain money. It's not a lot of money. For example, the 49ers' entire draft class this year on the 53-man roster, all 11 players, if they all make the 53-man, the 49ers' entire draft class will cost just about $12 million. They've got $296.6 million total to play with. So you can fill 11 of the spots for $12 million. That sloppy math in my head right now, that means you've got $284 million remaining for 40-something spots, 40, 41, 42 spots on the roster, and you can fill those with veterans. So the draft is the way to become salary cap compliant, but just releasing good, productive players, your star players, your more expensive players, willy-nilly is not a good way to be salary cap compliant. The 49ers are trying to run a balancing act. You keep your expensive players, you even potentially add to your core of expensive players because the cap has gone up $31 million this year, but you're able to afford that on the back end. And we're going to illustrate some of that through here. You're able to afford that by making sure that the non-premium positions are filled with cheaper talent. So you can go and you could spend on your steak, you can spend on your main course, but then you want to make sure that the sides and the accompaniments that you have with the main course, you want to make sure that you're not splurging on those. You want to make sure that they do the job, but you're not wasting money on a salad if you're the 49ers. Spend on the meat, save on the salad. I think that's a good way to go about life. And it's also a good way to go about the NFL salary cap. I have, when I talk about the salary cap and I explain it, a quick explainer is, and I'll pop this open again. You've got your liabilities. So you have what every player costs. And first off, you do have your $296.6 million limit, which is dependent on how much carryover you get. Obviously, unused space one season carries over to the next. But you add up every player's cap hit in any given season, and every single dollar that you pay a player has to eventually hit the cap, even if you shuffle it around from year to year. You add it all up, and it has to be under $296.6 million for the 49ers. So just really by nature of how this works, Brock Purdy, who's at $1 million this year, he is $1 million out of $296.6 million. You don't find quarterbacks, especially this good, this cheap. It's probably actually never happened before in NFL history. Just by that alone, Brock Purdy, I thought, should have been the most valuable player this past year, but that's a discussion for another time. Christian McCaffrey costs $14.14 million this year. Kyle Juszczyk, $7.6 million. You could see how cheap rookies are. Somebody like Ronnie Bell's $930,000 for the 49ers. Colton McKivitz, $3.6 million. Over on the right side, Fred Warner, $24.47 million. Armstead, they've pushed a lot of his money back, so it's hitting this year, $28.35 million. He's one of the most expensive 49ers. The most expensive is Trent Williams at $31.57 million. Anyway, when you add all of those liabilities up, it comes out to $277.51 million. And this is a projected 53-man roster, by the way. So I have 41 names on it. 296.6 is the limit. So I still have 19 million to play with for 12 more spots with this 49ers team. That is how the 49ers are in salary cap compliance. They sure have a lot of big contracts there, but you've seen Brock Purdy. You've seen the smaller deals on that roster. You've seen that a lot of their rookies have indeed showed up to play for them, even on their rookie contracts. They have surfed the wave of the rising salary cap. They've doubled down on their A-list players, but that doubling down has not come with a loss of flexibility because they haven't had to double down on mediocre players or bad players to fill spots. For the non-marquee spots, the 49ers have been able to find young, cost-controlled talent, which makes this NFL draft coming up with 11 picks that will cost only $12 million max total. That makes this NFL draft extremely, extremely important. I look at it as the sink theory. Here's the sink theory. You've got a sink. It's filling up with water. That sink is your roster and your salary cap space. So the more water that pours in, obviously, the more contracts you've given out. If that sink ever overflows past the lip, right, that means you're in trouble. That means there's going to be a mess. That means you're going to have to cut players, kind of like the Buffalo Bills had to cut today. The sink also has a drain at the bottom of it. So while a faucet is delivering you contracts, pouring you money in, the drain has to be letting some water out, or else eventually you're going to be overflowing at the top and you're going to have to make some painful cuts. So the 49ers are in cap compliance because so far they have kept their sink from overflowing. This is the 2024 cap. I've got 19 million on my projection with 53 men. The 2025 cap, this is a more crowded room for the 49ers. They've got 41.3 million in projected space on a 53-man roster, but only 27 players projected to make the 53-man right now. So they're going to have to make a lot of signings between now and 2025 and maybe some re-signings, including one for Brock Purdy. And this one for Brock Purdy is probably going to cost more than $1.12 million. They're going to have to up that cap hit. They're going to have to find a way to keep this number as low or as high. Well, this one as high as possible. This liability number as low as possible. The space number as high as possible so they can fill out the rest of their roster. At the end of the day, it's a simple addition subtraction thing. At the end of the day, the sum of your cap hits has to fit under the total salary cap, and the sum of the cap hits are your total cap liabilities. Now, you can reshuffle money. We talk about restructures. That means pushing money into future years, but you can't run from it forever. It's almost like a credit card, but without interest. It does make sense to push money into the future, but all credit cards do have spending limits. And there is a spending limit. And if you hit the spending limit, well, you better get under the spending limit. And the only way to get under the spending limit is to start cutting people. And that's exactly what the Buffalo Bills did today. More NFL news today as we made this an NFL update. Obviously, Tre'Davious White, Poyer, Morse, Hardy, and Neal all cut by the Bills. The Commanders and Adam Peters, the 49ers former executive, signed Zach Ertz. $5 million, up to $5 million this year for tight end Zach Ertz, the former Stanford product. Was on the Lions roster at the end of the season, but was not active for the NFC Championship game. It's interesting to me. I wonder if the 49ers were interested in Zach Ertz from the Adam Peters side, because Peters was still with the Niners at the time, assistant general manager. They were interested in him for a while, I remember, because he was granted his release from Arizona in December, but didn't sign with a team until, I believe, at that point, Adam Peters might have already been in Washington when he signed with Detroit. Anyway, Adam Peters is now the GM of Washington, and they did sign Zach Ertz. The Eagles cut Avonte Maddox, who's played a lot of nickelback for them. So Maddox, no longer with the Eagles. The Texans re-signed their kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn, formerly of UCLA. 3 years, $15.9 million. That's a big contract for a kicker. I think Justin Tucker's at $6, maybe $7 million a year. Fairbairn there, that's over $5 million a year for him. And the Bills did make a re-signing. Their guard David Andrews is back, 2 years, $6 million. No transactions, at least yet, for the 49ers. As I mentioned, they're in the offseason, only the top 51 contracts count against the salary cap. So in the offseason, my build your roster tool, this should not be used to measure offseason salary cap space. This is to build the roster for what it's going to look like in week one. This is a bigger picture tool. Right now, I'm only counting 41 players against the salary cap, which is why there's 19 million in room. But the top 51 on the entire 90-man roster, that includes guys who will not make the 53-man roster. Those guys all count against the cap right now for the 49ers. And that means they're right up near the limit. So they might, if they're going to make a big signing next week in free agency, if they're going to make a trade for L'Jarius Sneed, or if they're going to sign Danielle Hunter, the edge rusher, the 49ers will likely have to open up some room. Now, remember, a Brandon Ayuk extension, I could show you here, would actually save room for them. Actually, I should get off this page because we've got, let's go to the copy. I don't want to mess up anybody working on their roster. As you can see here, we've got 3 people working on the roster. So we're going to go over here. We're going to give Brandon Ayuk an extension. It's going to go, and keep an eye on this right here. Keep an eye on 19.09 million. Ayuk's cap hit down from 14.1 to 8. Oh, all of a sudden we've got 25.2 million. We can restructure Fred Warner, move his number into the future. All of a sudden we got 35.7 million. And then, then we could think about making some big time signings. So say I want to bring in Robert Hunt. I just did. $12 million cap hit, took a bite out of the space. And how about a text title for Robert Hunt? If you're wondering who Robert Hunt is, this is for all of you saying that the 49ers need to invest in the offensive line. Hunt has played right guard for the Dolphins. He's fit well in Mike McDaniel's scheme. He was actually the top-rated pass protector in the entire National Football League amongst guards in terms of PFF's pass blocking efficiency. Only 360 pass blocking snaps. Hunt missed a little bit of time with injury this year, but he played a solid chunk of the season. Only gave up 5 pressures over those 360 reps. 1 sack and 5 pressures. As we know, the biggest weakness of this 49ers team statistically was the right side of the offensive line. Spencer Burford, John Feliciano, and Colton McKivitz. The first two names are guards, right guard. The final name, McKivitz, is a right tackle. Mike McDaniel runs a scheme that is different, yet obviously shares some similarities with what the 49ers have since he worked so long with Kyle Shanahan. The trick in both schemes, the commonality across them, is the need for athletic offensive linemen. But the more set into the drop back passing game you get, and I think that the 49ers are trending that way. I think Miami obviously is set in that drop back passing game, on top of the fact that Miami also likes to run the football, of course. They've got a lot of speed in the backfield. But when you're in that drop back passing game a lot, and Tua had a ton of yards this year, was very efficient during the regular season. And obviously, Brock Purdy was borderline historic with some of his numbers. Whenever that's the case, whenever there's that much focus on the aerial game, you have to invest in that offensive line. And it's not like the 49ers haven't. Obviously, they signed Trent Williams. They drafted Aaron Banks. They signed Alex Mack. Then they made sure that they developed and signed Jake Brendel. But it's the right side of the offensive line that has been a statistical weakness for this team. And there are so many different ways to skin the cat moving forward. A lot of people are talking about the great draft class at tackle. They're saying, oh, maybe the 49ers should trade up from number 31, grab a tackle that can also be the he could be the protege, right? He could be the heir apparent to Trent Williams on the left side. Obviously, they can go that route. They can try to draft a guard, or a guard that could potentially play center in the future, with center being as important as it is. That might be somebody like the guy that I picked today, Graham Barton, in my mock draft out of Duke. Or they can turn earlier to the free agent market, see who they can net at a reasonable price on the free agent market, and then know what they need to do entering the draft, while keeping in mind of the draft, you can pick a player out of college, but he can completely bust on you. The free agency pool is more expensive, but in a way safer, because you've got much, much more of an idea of how that player can handle the NFL level. Things are going to change in between schemes. I would say, though, in general, the 49ers have gotten better production out of players on their team than when those players were on another team. And one player who you can draw some schematic parallels with is Robert Hunt. He might be one of the more expensive guards on this free agent market, but the fact that the 49ers would be able to go and get a plug-and-play weapon for that right guard position, and I have Hunt picked here in this roster builder, well, that could free them up to do some work, maybe even trade up for a right tackle. Maybe they can use a first-round pick on that right tackle. Look how cheap that would be. It'd only be $2.51 million on the season. So they would still have $21 million in cap space. At that point, hell, maybe you can go and take a big swing. I talked about this a little bit earlier today. Make sure you don't miss the video. I was on KMBR with Papa and Lund. Let's say Danielle Hunter. Let's say Danielle Hunter at $21 million a year. Let's say that would be like a Deion Sanders-like pickup for the 49ers, as far as something that would send shockwaves around the league and potentially put them in a position where they have leapfrogged the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, that would be wild, right? If the 49ers were able to get both Hunter and Hunt. That's great. Hunter and Hunt. Yeah, maybe that's the theme of free agency. Robert Hunt and Danielle Hunter. What if they're able to get both of those guys? What if they're able to bring back somebody like Cleveland Farrell on a smaller deal? What if they're able to re-sign Logan Ryan at that nickelback spot? I mean, there's so many things. I'm now over the cap by about $4 million, but I do still have a potential restructure in my back pocket. I think Christian McCaffrey is going to be around for at least a few more years, maybe 2 more. At least, I mean, he's under contract for 2 more. So why don't we restructure his deal? Boom. There we go. We restructured McCaffrey. We opened up cap space. We have signed both Danielle Hunter and Robert Hunt. I'm not saying the 49ers are going to be this aggressive, but I do think that Brock Purdy is ushering in the changing of an era for the 49ers. When I talk about changing of an era, I look at the 2025 cap sheet and I see a lot of spaces to fill, with not a whole lot of room to fill, considering the fact that Brock Purdy's contract is probably going to make a spike once he gets a new deal. And when that happens, you're going to have less room around the quarterback to field a star core. We've seen it happen across the NFL countless times with different teams. They can build around the cheap quarterback with a lot of money elsewhere, but once that quarterback gets expensive, you generally have to jettison at least some of that money elsewhere. So the long story short is that Brock Purdy is on pace to become a bigger and bigger focal point of this 49ers operation. And if your quarterback is a bigger and bigger focal point, the importance to support him becomes more and more important. I think the best way to support Brock Purdy would be to insulate the offensive line in front of him. So that's why I bring up somebody like Robert Hunt, scheduled to be a free agent. He was not franchise tagged by the Miami Dolphins. You might remember him. He scored one of the more memorable big person touchdowns a couple years ago. It was a primetime game against the Ravens. Forgot which day it was, but it was a primetime game, national TV against the Ravens. I believe it was an ineligible man downfield. But who cares? Because Robert Hunt helicoptered his way into the end zone, grabbed the football, juked his way for about 10 yards, helicoptered into the end zone. It was fun to watch. It was actually a good testament of his athleticism. This guy is 330 pounds, so he's heavier than your typical 305-pound guard. I think Ezra Cleveland, who's somebody the 49ers have been interested in, might be interested in again this offseason. He's about 306. So Cleveland, quick, twitchy guard, zone scheme kind of guy, but a little bit light, so he isn't as good of a pass protector. Robert Hunt is, again, the number one pass protector in football over this past season. If you look at the pressure rate and the pass block productivity score, and he's 330. And I think that the 330 is very correlated to the fact that he is that good of a pass protector, because you could anchor at that weight. Anchoring against bull rushers, that's something that it's really hard to do if you are a lighter player. Anyway, check out the Build Your Roster tool. If you want me to do something else that's cool, just let me know. I'll take a look in the comments section here in a little bit. I still have 7 spots to fill, and I only have 4.3 million to do it. So this kind of illustrates, especially if I want a good quarterback room and I bring back somebody like Sam Darnold, I'm over the cap again. Oops, I wish I had that open for you when I did that here. I'll do it again. So say I'm at 4.3 million. Say that I sign Sam Darnold, who's rumored to be a person of interest for the Minnesota Vikings starting QB job if Kirk Cousins leaves. But there you can see it. Over the cap by 1.18 million. So we're going to have to make other deals. First off, I want to cut Cameron Latu. Although it's going to be more expensive to cut him than to keep him when you consider they're going to have to sign somebody else. You do save some money, but it is not the most cost-efficient way of doing business. Same thing with Ambry Thomas, because you have to have replacements for these guys on the 53-man roster. We're down to 45 of 53 spots taken. We got to fill up 8 spots with 0.6 million. That's why I think signing Robert Hunt and Danielle Hunter, which I've done in this sheet, would be tough for the 49ers. And hopefully this helps illustrate it for you. Hopefully this whole explainer helps you understand how the NFL salary cap works. So if you have any questions, why don't you let me know? I'm going to want to go get some water. So I'm going to put that I'll be right back right now. But let's get those questions going. I'm going to go get some water. I'm going to hop into the comments section in just a second. So enjoy the depth chart or enjoy the Build Your Roster, and I'll be back in about 30 seconds. All right, we are back. The water has been obtained. 49ers Q&A time. Gonna go up to this. Cheers. I think it's bad luck to cheers water, according to some cultures, not mine. So I think it's Greek culture. I think they say you're not supposed to cheer water. I'm not Greek, though. All right, let's go. Sean wants the 49ers to sign the offensive lineman from Duke. I think you're talking about Graham Barton. Speaking of that, the roster builder, Matt Barrows and I today, we actually showed what our rosters look like. So that's in this piece right here. But I want to scroll down and find you my mock draft since you mentioned the lineman from Duke. Here we go. David Lombardi's mock draft. Look at that first pick. Graham Barton out of Duke. He's played both tackle spots, can play guard, and can play center. I think this guy, at college at least, was able to play all 5 spots on the offensive line. NFL, they're looking at him more as an interior guy. But, hey, if you've played tackle at the E1 level, you could fill in in a pinch at NFL. It might not be your best spot. But center is also really important to the 49ers, and I think the pressing need is at right guard. So I think that first-round pick on Graham Barton, who might slip down to that area, that could be something that works really well for the 49ers. Brian asks, what are the Buffalo Bills doing? They're trying to get under the salary cap. There's so many people that say that the salary cap's not real. Well, days like today, because teams have to be under the cap and the Bills were $40 million over to begin, days like today really underscore, yes, the cap is real. The Bills had to get under it. Do I think that Chris Jones is possible at all? Well, let's look at the roster builder and see how much it would cost. By the way, if you haven't signed up for the roster builder yet, it's time to do it. So say that they wanted to look, we're at 0.6 million in cap space. We don't have much left. Say that we tried to sign Chris Jones. Oh, crap. 30 million. Yeah, that'd be tough. Now, keep in mind that I've already signed Danielle Hunter. That's expensive. And that I've signed Robert Hunt. So say that you, instead of Hunt, say that you want a budget, go John Feliciano instead of Hunt. And say that we took Danielle Hunter out of the mix. Yeah, you'd have enough money for Chris Jones. Basically, Chris Jones would cost Danielle Hunter plus Robert Hunt. Chris Jones is a game record, though. It just would be a lot of money to pay a position. You probably wouldn't have Eric Armstead on the team anymore if you went that way. So you'd probably cut Eric Armstead. You'd save a few $1 million through that. And you would move forward. It just doesn't seem very likely because they've got needs that stretch beyond just the defensive line. It's a good question. Curious how you backfill for someone like Kyle Juszczyk. He's so integral on so many plans of Shanahan's offense, but there isn't really his skill set readily available when he does age. Well, he is aging, but he's still just as good. So he's aged very gracefully. We'll put it that way. I think, I don't want to take anything away from what Kyle Juszczyk does because you're right. He is exceptional. He does so much dirty work for the 49ers. And then he can also catch the ball. He's athletic. But some of the blocks they ask him to do are really, really physically challenging. They have flirted with bringing in other fullbacks for the practice squad. Josh Hokett was one of those guys over the years. I think the goal has been to craft those guys into potential heir apparents for Kyle Juszczyk, but he hasn't needed an heir apparent so far for the 49ers. He's just kept on churning. He's reliable. He's good. He's unique. If you cannot find somebody to fill Juszczyk's shoes when his time with the 49ers is done, and he's still under contract for 2 more seasons. But if you can't find somebody for that, you will have to alter the way that you operate offensively. It's hurt when he hadn't missed much time, but whenever he has missed time, the 49ers have not been nearly as good. So fans need to appreciate what Kyle Juszczyk does. I still remember when he blocked Carlos Dunlap, a defensive end in 2019, coming across the formation on a play action. I mean, that was Dunlap was edge rushing on the near side, and Juszczyk came over from the far side, crossed the quarterback, made the block. I mean, that's really hard stuff that the casual fan will not pay attention to. The 49ers threw a touchdown on the play. I think it was Garoppolo to Marquise Goodwin. It might have been on that play. If Kyle Juszczyk doesn't execute one of the most difficult blocks that you'll ever see, the play doesn't sniff becoming a touchdown, and it probably is a sack. So Juszczyk is really damn important. And the best you can do is continue bringing in players, youngsters, that might be able to assume his role and have them work behind the scenes for a year or two. But that's a lot easier said than done. In my mock draft, made sure the 49ers took Ben Sinnott in the 4th round. He's a really athletic tight end out of Kansas State that's played some H-back that I think could deliver in a fullback role at the NFL level. I think that'd be a bonus. I think his athleticism, his relative athletic score, he's a 90th percentile guy, makes him a 4th or a 5th rounder. I went ahead and I took him at the 4th because he has been impressive from that movement capability. And we'll see what the 49ers end up doing. Spencer hopes the 49ers bring in successors for Trent Williams and Kyle Juszczyk sooner rather than later. Some of it's luck of the draw, though. You can try all you want. You can think you have your guy, but sometimes that guy isn't necessarily the successor. And that's when you start to run into a few more problems. Charles Johnson thinks the 49ers need another big hitter in the secondary. They're only playing Ward. I think that Diamaro Lenore is a big hitter, and you might be able to extend him early, even if it's something that helps save the 49ers money in the big picture of things. So Diamaro Lenore is a legit player. I do agree they need one more piece to try to get over that hump. The Kansas City Chiefs in the secondary. That's why there's talk in 49ers fan circles about L'Jarius Sneed. I don't think the 49ers would be willing to pay the draft capital the Chiefs would require for him in a trade because they just franchise tagged him. I do think that you can go and add to the back end, though, without necessarily procuring a top end piece. If you look, and some of the top end pieces got franchise tagged. You look at somebody like Jalen Johnson, who the 49ers were interested in trading for with the Bears before the deadline. He's been franchise tagged. There's Kendall Fuller out there, Chidobe Awuzie, Stephon Gilmore. He's aging. Darius Williams just got cut yesterday. Sean Murphy Bunting, Adoree Jackson, maybe a nickel cornerback for the 49ers, Steven Nelson. Those are all names. The draft will have many more of them. I agree. I think the 49ers need a little bit more firepower in the secondary to feel truly confident. I think Ambry Thomas fell out of favor over the course of last season. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm going to do something on Danielle Hunter coming up, so be sure that you are tuned in for that. We will talk to everybody soon.